Hi, my name is Delica Cee, and today I'm going to read to you one of my favorite childhood books. My mom found this book, and I guess she knew I was a special child as a kid, and so she used to read this one to me. It's called Hobbee, Scrogneenee by Anne Rocard and Marino Degano. Under Golden Hill Park, in the town of Lilyville, lives a family of monsters. Horrible, scary, slobbering monsters with 6 eyes in the front of their hairy heads. Scrogneenee is their name. At night, when the local policeman is making his rounds in the park, he sometimes thinks that he sees strange shadows. But because he's late and tired, he thinks it's just his imagination. Nevertheless, it's true. They have dug a tunnel under the first prickly bush to the right of the sandbox. They only come out at night when good little children are asleep. When they want to go home, they push the branches of the prickly bush to one side, lift the moss-covered trapdoor, and go down a long spiral staircase to their tunnel. Every night, Papadamos, the father, says to his family, "Let's go!" And in a single file, the whole Scrogneenee family follows him. First, Mamadamus, the mother, then Grandpadamus, the granddad, after him Conniedamus, the sister, and always a few yards behind, Hobbiedamus. By monster standards, a good-for-nothing little monster. "Hurry up, Hobbie," his father growls. "How could we have such a child?" his mother complains. "In my day, we were much more obedient," grumbles his granddad. "My brother is such a nerd," his sister chimes in. Hobbie can only shrug his shoulders. He doesn't like to put holes in tires, unscrew light bulbs from street lamps, or break store windows. But in the Scrogneenee family, you must obey your father's orders, and Papadamos has decided. "I want Hobbie to be the scariest monster on Earth." One night, as the Scrogneenee family ran through Barber Street, Hobbie stopped to look up at a story window where the light was still on. He listened for a minute and heard a little girl crying. "Maybe she's been yelled at like me," he thought. "I would like to make her feel better. But how?" Before he had time to think, Connie pulled him away by his hair. "Drag your feet on the ground," his father ordered him. "Pick your nose," his mother added. "And don't put your hand in front of your mouth when you cough," warned his granddad. "My brother is such a nerd," concluded his sister. Finally, their night of troublemaking finished, the satisfied Scrogneenies went back to their tunnel. As a monster, it was sure, Hobbie was not worth much. At the monster school he went to last year, he was always the worst in class. Why? Because he never made the smallest mistake in English class, not even one error in arithmetic. And worst of all, he refused to copy from the other students' test papers. He would not cheat at all. By the end of this day, his teacher would be so angry with him, she would make Hobbie stand in the corner of the classroom, and all the other little monsters would point and laugh at him, shouting, "Hobbie is a nerd! Hobbie is a nerd!" Finally, the principal kicked Hobbie out of the school for being too good. As Hobbie went out the door, the principal said to himself, "We don't want little monsters who work like Hobbie." After that, Hobbie did not go to school anymore. He did not have to learn to make mistakes or tear up notebooks. He was happy because he liked to read and draw pictures of beautiful flowers in pretty colors. But his family was not happy with him at all. His mother told him, "You're wasting your time. A monster should never read. It might put ideas in his head. And his father said the same thing. You're wasting your time. Who taught you to draw beautiful flowers anyway? You should be drawing horrible pictures of slimy snakes, scary spiders, and deadly dragons. That night, Hobbee whispered to himself, I've had enough of my horrible family. I wish they would go far, far away from me, and I would never have to see them again. He began to cry softly, with the green and yellow tears of a little monster. He had too much of a horrible monster's life. He was tired of being growled at, sick of being hit and laughed at by all the other monsters, big and small. He couldn't take it anymore. That night, he decided he would find the little girl he had seen crying the night before. A little later, the Scrogneenees, walking in single file, came out of their tunnel onto the streets of Lilyville. Papadamos was at the head of the line, and he was in a very bad mood. Hurry up, Hobbee, he growled. How can we have such a child? Mamadamas complained. In my day, monsters knew how to behave, Grandpadamas grumbled. He's such a nerd, said Connie without turning around. But Hobbee was no longer there. He had hidden behind a garbage can without making a sound. They didn't see me disappear. Then he tiptoed away to Barber Street. There were no lights on in the building, but again he heard a little girl crying. He wondered how he could get up to her window. Then he stacked some garbage cans on top of one another, climbed to the top of his funny-looking tower, and peeked in the window. There, he saw a little girl with brown hair sitting on her bed, crying and sniffling without stopping. I don't want to go to bed. I'm thirsty, and no one will give me anything to drink. I've had enough of my family. I wish they would go far, far away from me, and that I would never, ever have to see them again. Hobbee couldn't believe it. The little girl was saying exactly the same thing that he had. So he tapped lightly on the window. The little girl, surprised by the tapping, went to the window and asked, What are you doing there? I'm looking at you, Hobbee said. The little girl made a face at him. You look really scary, she said. I'm scary. I'm horrible and slobbering with 6 eyes in the front of my head, Hobbee said proudly. My name is Hobbee Scrogneenee, but everyone calls me Hobbee. My name is Lucy, said the little girl. Then she opened the window and Hobbee jumped in. They sat on the floor together and talked and talked and talked until the sun came up. Lucy told Hobbee she was unhappy because her parents were so mean to her, but Hobbee said, I don't think they are mean to you. They are trying to teach you to be good so that you'll be a good person when you grow up. Lucy was surprised by this. But you left your family, she said. That's because in a monster family, the parents teach you to be bad so that you'll be a bad monster when you grow up. The little girl whispered in Hobbee's ear, I would really like for you to stay here. Hobbee thought for a moment and said, You know, I'm not a really well-brought-up monster. I never pick my nose. I do, said Lucy. I always put my hand in front of my mouth when I cough or sneeze, continued Hobbee. I don't. I never put my elbows on the table, he said. But I do, she answered. And I never stick my tongue out at people or say bad words, added the little monster. Well, I do, said Lucy started to laugh and said to him, Hobbee, you are very strange. Then she took Hobbee by the paw and led him to the other side of her room. Look, I have a hiding place for you in a little suitcase under my bed. If you want, you can stay in there, and it will be our secret. Okay, said Hobbee. Then, very suddenly, Lucy felt very sleepy. Luckily, there was no school that day, so she climbed into her bed, and the little monster climbed into his hiding space. Outside, on Barber Street, the sun was shining brightly, but in the tiny room the 2 new friends were fast asleep. And what happened to the Scrogneenee family? After searching through the streets of Lilyvale for Hobbee, they returned to their tunnel in Golden Hill Park. "Good riddance. He was not a bad monster," growled Papadamos. "How could we have had such a child?" Mamadamus complained. "In my day, monsters didn't get lost," grumbled Grandpadamus. "My brother was such a nerd," sneered Conniedamus. The next day, the four of them packed their bags and moved to another town. They were sick and tired of Lilyville, and no one has ever heard of them again. However, there is still one little monster in Lilyville. Scary, horrible, slobbering, with 6 eyes in his hairy head. A little monster, not worth much by monster standards. He lives in his hiding place on Barber Street, and he has finally taught his friend Lucy not to pick her nose, but she still whispers in his ear all the bad words she knows. Furphy, utters, crazy, keister, but shh, you should never repeat them. And if sometimes you think you see a moonlit shadow of a little monster in Golden Hill Park, remember, no one must ever know that Hobbydamus Scrogneenee has become Lucy's best friend. It's their little secret. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.